2 lowborn men and the dragons that bore them. Sent to defend a town, they burned it instead. Thousands died screaming, or drowned in the river fleeing the flames. And when historians ask why they turned their cloaks, the answer is always the same. We shall never know. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries. This is Mysteries of the Realm. Episode 17. Why They Turned. 2 dragon riders who burned their own side. To understand the betrayal, you must understand where these 2 men came from. They were not born to dragons. They were Dragonseeds, small folk said to carry the bastard blood of old Valyria, with its silver hair and pale eyes. When the blacks ran short of riders, Prince Jacaerys Velaryon summoned every such man to Dragonstone. Claim a riderless dragon, he promised, and you would be knighted, given lands and gold. Chroniclers called it the Sowing of the Seeds. Others called it the Red Sowing. It earned that name. By Munkun's count, 16 men died, and 48 were burned or maimed, charred by the very dragons they reached for. But 4 succeeded. Hard Hugh Hammer, bastard son of a common blacksmith, a giant of a man whose hands were said to twist steel bars into torques. He claimed Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, once the mount of the old king himself, the second largest dragon then living, after only Vhagar. And Ulf the White, a low-born man-at-arms, a drunkard of the wine sinks, white-haired and Valyrian-featured, who claimed to be the natural son of some Targaryen prince. He claimed Silverwing, once ridden by Good Queen Alysanne, Vermithor's own mate. For their service, Queen Rhaenyra knighted both and granted them lands on Driftmark. And both men, the chroniclers tell us, thought it far too little. They rode the most fearsome beasts in the world. They saw themselves as kingmakers. A few holdings on a rocky island felt like an insult. Then came Tumbleton. Lord Ormond Hightower marched a green host up from the Reach toward King's Landing. Rhaenyra sent Hugh and Ulf with Vermithor and Silverwing to stop him at Tumbleton, the last black stronghold before the capital. They arrived as defenders. They turned their dragons on the town. Vermithor, Silverwing, and Prince Daeron's Tessarion loosed their fire together, and Tumbleton burned. Thousands died in the flames or drowned in the Mander. The sack that followed was long and brutal. History remembers them as the 2 betrayers. And here is the mystery that has outlasted them by 2 centuries. Why? Why did 2 men handed dragons, knighthoods, and lands turn against the queen who raised them up? What did they want that she had not given? Neither man could read nor write. Neither left a single word of his own. Every reason we have was supplied by other men, hostile men, writing later. So let us weigh what they said and see how much of it we can believe. Start with the simplest answer: greed. This is the explanation Gildane calls the most common, and the evidence for it is strong. Rhaenyra had already paid these men, and they had already declared the payment too small. That is the textbook beginning of a man who will sell to a higher bidder. And look at how they behaved after they turned. When the Greens named Ulf Lord of Bitterbridge, he scorned it and demanded Highgarden instead. Hugh aimed higher still. He wanted a crown. This is not the conduct of men following a cause. It is haggling, a dragon for sale, and the price climbing. The biographies fit the theory too. Ulf is drawn as gluttonous, lustful, perpetually drunk. Hugh as a brute of appetite and little restraint. Neither is ever painted as a man of principle. And yet, if pure greed for the higher bidder drove them, the Greens were a poor bargain. Rhaenyra held the throne and the capital. Ormond Hightower's host was outnumbered and had won nothing yet. A cold opportunist sells to the side that is winning, not to the smaller army before it has proven itself. Something other than arithmetic seems to have been in play, and there is a line that greed alone cannot explain. Septon Eustace records Hugh saying, "The black has no king, and the green has no right. Sit with that. He is not choosing a side. He is dismissing both. The black has no king worthy of the name, and the green has no rightful claim to the throne." In Hugh's mouth, this is not a sellsword picking a buyer. It is a man who holds the whole highborn order in contempt, and perhaps means to take the throne himself. That points us toward a second theory. Not greed, but grievance. Consider how these men were used. They were summoned, handed dragons, knighted, and then never accepted. Rhaenyra's noble backers, the Valerians, the Celtigars, and the rest, saw them as weapons, not as lords. A blacksmith's bastard might ride the old king's dragon and still never be asked to sit at the high table. The slight was not only in the size of the reward, it was in the refusal to see them as equals at all. If that is the wound, then Hugh's words make perfect sense. A man insulted by both sides owes loyalty to neither, and the pattern held to the very end. The Greens repeated the contempt exactly. The lords at Tumbleton, the ones called the caltrops, came to fear and despise these overmighty, low-born riders, and conspired to be rid of them. Both the side they left and the side they joined treated them as disposable. That consistent high-born scorn is precisely the force this theory names as their motive. But be careful here. Grievance and greed look almost identical from the outside. "I was insulted," and "I want more" produce the same behavior. A man demanding ever greater rewards. And Eustace, who gives us that perfect quotable line, was a moralizer. A line that clean, that thesis-shaped, should make us suspicious. It may tell us what a Septon wished to teach more than what a blacksmith's son actually said. Now to the strangest theory of all, prophecy. When Hugh claimed Vermithor, the old king's own dragon, something shifted in him. Fire and Blood tells us that Lord Hammer, as he now styled himself, began to dream of crowns. And among his soldiers a prophecy spread. When the hammer shall fall upon the dragon, a new king shall arise, and none shall stand before him. A hammer, falling upon a dragon. And here was a man named Hammer, riding to war against dragon riders. He seems to have believed the words were about him. The evidence for this is, in its way, the most specific we have. The text ties his name directly to the prophecy. It tells us the prophecy fed his ambition. He did not merely want richer lands. He gathered a following of men who believed he was destined to be king. A simple bribe-taker does not need prophets in his ranks. A would-be chosen king does. And yet, the doubts here are real. The prophecy seems to have taken hold after Hugh already had his dragon. It explains why he refused to stop climbing more than why he first turned his cloak. And the line itself is suspiciously neat. A slogan that flatters the man and matches his very name is exactly what hostile chroniclers would invent to paint him as a deluded upstart, drunk on his own legend, a tale of pride before the fall. Because the prophecy was never fulfilled. Hugh rushed to reach Vermithor at the Second Battle of Tumbleton, and was cut down by Lord John Roxton's Valyrian blade, Orphan Maker. "Lord Hammer," Roxton is said to have told him, "my condolences, you died in the battle." No crown ever touched his brow. And notice, the prophecy belongs to Hugh alone. Ulf had no hammer, no foretelling. Yet Ulf turned his cloak just the same, which raises a darker possibility, that there was no grand motive to find, that these men were never truly loyal in the first place. Think back to the Sowing. They did not come to Dragonstone for a queen. They came for gold and a dragon. The bargain was nakedly mercenary from the start, and a man who was bought has nothing to betray when a better offer appears. He simply moves to where the bidding is higher. That would explain the speed of it. They arrived as defenders and left as destroyers, with no agonizing, no slow souring of faith. It would explain why they were so easily disposed of afterward. Roxton's blade for Hugh, and for Ulf a cup of poisoned arbor gold, handed to him by Sir Hobart Hightower, who knew the drunkard preferred his wine sweet. Men who can be lured to defect and quietly murdered within days were pawns, moved by greater players. But this tidy explanation has a flaw of its own. It makes them small, and the chroniclers, for all their hostility, do not draw small men. They draw men with swelling, dangerous designs. Hugh dreaming of crowns, Ulf spurning a lordship and demanding Highgarden. Then, when Hugh was dead, resolving to press his own claim to the throne. Those are not empty mercenaries with nothing inside them. Those are overreaching men with too much. And remember the worst voice of all in this story. Mushroom. The fool's account reduces Ulf to a sot drowning in wine and rape at Tumbleton, with no motive but appetite. It is the most lurid version and the least trustworthy. The kind of tale told to make low-born men seem like beasts. When we lean too hard on greed and vice, we may simply be inheriting the prejudice that every one of these chroniclers shared. So what do I believe? I think the truest answer Fire and Blood ever gives us is the one it gives plainly. That because these men left no words of their own, we shall never know. And I think we should resist the comfort of pretending otherwise. But if you press me, I do not believe it was simple greed. Greed does not say, "The black has no king, and the green has no right." That is the voice of a man who felt the world had set his worth too low and meant to set it right himself. I think Hugh and Ulf were given dragons and denied dignity, raised just high enough to see everything they were still being refused. And I think a man given a god's power and a beggar's place will eventually decide the rules were never fair to begin with. The greed was real. But underneath it, I suspect, was something the lords never thought to fear in their low-born weapons. The belief that they deserved more. So tell me this, were the two betrayers driven by greed, by grievance, or by a destiny they imagined for themselves? Write it in the comments. I read every theory, and if you want to be here when we unravel the next mystery, subscribe to Westeros Within and join me for the next chapter. Word count, 1750 words. Runtime, 13:14 mine at Bill's pace. All lore verified, book only against the provided Fire and Blood, ASOIAF research. Format locked, cold open, canonical welcome verbatim, placeholders preserved, investigation mode with for, against on all four theories, softened certainty throughout, personal verdict, locked ending verbatim.